When Natasha Romanoff plummeted to her death in Avengers Endgame, I was gutted. But it wasn't until she did not get the funeral that she deserved that I came to terms with the finality of her demise. There's always an air of uncertainty around fictional deaths, especially when an important character like Natasha dies. And that's because movies and TV shows have repeatedly undone, misrepresented, and defied character deaths. There are a number of reasons that might justify this. For starters, fictional premises choose not to strictly play by the rules of life and death in order to push creative boundaries. Popular characters are also revived when a franchise cannot go ahead without them and changes the circumstances of their demise. Let's get right into it and take a look at 25 characters who were pretty dead, or at least presumed dead, until they came back to life. The Fast and Furious movies are all about explosive heists and extreme stunts. Car crashes in the Fast franchise are about as common as casualties in the MCU, so bringing a presumably dead character back is really not that much of a challenge. This happened with Han, who died in the third movie. He was so popular that the makers made some timeline adjustments to keep him around for a while longer. In appearing in both Fast and Furious 5 and 6, which preceded Han's imminent death, fans thought that they'd said goodbye to the character. It seemed highly unlikely that Han survived the car crash which killed him, since, he was trapped in the T-bone car which then burst into flames. Dom and the family even held a funeral for the guy in Fast and Furious 7, and Dom also supposedly collected his remains from Tokyo, but I guess that reality bites the dust. Han appears very much alive in the trailer of Fast and Furious 9. We know that Fast 9 is not a prequel, so Han was either brought back from the dead or somehow managed the almost impossible task of surviving a car explosion. I entertain the possibility of Han's survival because the Fast saga has played with the character returns before. In a similar way to Han, Letty Ortiz came back after seemingly dying in the 2009 Fast installment. She too had a funeral, but the catch was that she never died in the first place. Letty was working to get Dom's charges cleared in Fast 4 when she was presumably killed in a car explosion. When Dom visited the explosion site, we saw Letty's death as he imagined it. It was later revealed that she actually crawled out of the car right before it exploded. What followed for Letty's character was a convenient case of amnesia and a few clashes with Dom until she eventually returned to his side. This further adds to the intrigue surrounding Han's return, seeing as the franchise will be expected to come up with a more innovative way to revive him. It was a dark day in television history when Eleven died in Stranger Things. This was supposed to be the end of Eleven's time in the show, in which she sacrificed herself trying to kill a monster from the Upside Down. But the show and Eleven both became increasingly popular. The creators saw that they could not go on without her in the next seasons, and promptly brought her back in Season 2. After the events of Season 1, which alluded to her death, Eleven actually woke up in the Upside Down dimension. She came back through a portal and remained hidden in Hopper's custody for a long time. Eleven eventually reunited with Mike and her friends and saved the day once again. This time though, she got her due reward by getting legally adopted by Hopper, attending the school dance, and sharing her first real kiss with Mike. After a sustained battle with the Balrog and the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf died from exhaustion and his wounds. Instead of being restored or revived though, Gandalf was reborn. It's important to note that Eru sent him back to Middle-earth so that he could fulfill his purpose of helping the people there in their battle against Sauron. So Gandalf the Grey returned as the wiser, more powerful Gandalf the White. The impact of Gandalf's rebirth famously extends beyond the Lord of the Rings universe. It deeply resonated with the 13-year-old George R.R. Martin, who would later go on to write the prolific Game of Thrones novels. Since I've spoken about George R.R. Martin, I'd be mad not to acknowledge the contribution that Game of Thrones has made to this list. That's right, here it comes. I'm talking about Jon Snow, who had easily the most expected resurrection in small screen history. Jon was stabbed to death in the 5th season's finale by a faction of the Night's Watch who resented his involvement with the Wildlings. But the Lord Commander was too important to leave the series that soon, especially with important revelations about his lineage still in the pipeline. Right on cue at the beginning of the 6th season, Melisandre brought him back to life. The Fox X-Men films are not exactly famous for their levity, but they really made me wary by killing off Professor X again and again. He died for the first time in X-Men: The Last Stand, and then somehow mysteriously showed up in Days of the Future Past, only to die again in Logan. Since the reason for his revival in Days of the Future Past was never really clarified, who knows? He might just return again for another death run. A TV character jumping off of a building and surviving seems laughable, but not if he's a detective expertly portrayed by Benedict Cumberbatch. Sherlock has been played by a talented ensemble of actors over the years, but BBC and Benedict together showed us a more edgy version of the famous detective, so when Sherlock survived a fatal fall, fans were quick to assemble theories. In Season 2, Sherlock had to jump off St. Bart's Hospital to save John, Mrs. Hudson, and Lestrade. Although Sherlock himself gave us 3 possible explanations of the Reichenbach fall, the show implied that there were no definitive answers. Superman's return in Justice League is probably the most anticipated revival in movie history. Dawn of Justice was meant to set the ball rolling for the future Justice League movies. Zack Snyder, as we all know too well, had big plans for Superman's character arc and the entire DCEU narrative, so it was almost certain that the Man of Steel's death in Dawn of Justice would only be temporary. In Dawn of Justice, Superman was weakened by kryptonite before being fatally stabbed by Doomsday's arm. The movie's ending even teased us about his return by showing the dirt lift off of his grave, which made fans wildly speculate the theories of his resurrection. Although Snyder later revealed that this cliffhanger served a more symbolic purpose for him than anything else, it did lay the groundwork for Superman's return. As expected, Superman was back in Justice League after being revived by his allies using the power of the Mother Box. If you ask me, this does quite the backflip on Bruce's original fears of Superman going rogue, especially in light of his 1% chance reasoning. But well, Lois Lane took care of that for us in the movie. Let's move on before I go down the Doomsday Batman rabbit hole. The Good Place is a spunky, lighthearted show that deals with interesting moral concepts. Based on the premise of life after death, it begins with the main characters dying and ending up in the show's version of the afterlife. Despite being in frozen yogurt paradise, the characters constantly find themselves in uncomfortable situations. This ends when Eleanor realizes that they're part of a larger notorious scheme and actually belong in the bad place. After 2 seasons full of twists and turns, Eleanor and the gang were sent back to Earth to get a second chance at life. Not just any life, but a life full of good deeds that would help them earn their way into the actual good place. Now, some might argue that the characters just had their deaths erased, but this was only possible because they were killed in the first place. Patrick Stewart recently died and came back to life in a cool new synthetic body in Star Trek Picard, but this in no way compares to Spock's iconic death and resurrection in Star Trek 2 and 3. The Vulcans live incredibly long lives, but this seemed briefly untrue for Leonard Nimoy's Spock in Star Trek 2. In the movie, Spock died from radiation poisoning in a heroic attempt to restore a broken warp drive. He saved the ship from exploding and shared a heartbreaking final moment with Kirk, but it wasn't time to say goodbye to Nimoy's incredibly popular Spock just yet. In Star Trek 3, Spock was reborn as a baby on the Genesis planet, went through some quick aging, and was promptly returned to audiences in his grown-up form. It was strange, but hey, if that's what it takes to keep Leonard Nimoy in the franchise, I am not one to complain. 2014 was a pretty good year for movies. I'm not just looking at Interstellar or Guardians of the Galaxy, but a sci-fi action delight called Edge of Tomorrow. The film's agenda was simple: live, die, repeat. It had the 2 classic ingredients of a science fiction movie: killer aliens and time loops. The only surprise in Edge of Tomorrow was that Tom Cruise had no combat skills in it whatsoever. This forced him into an endless loop of dying and waking up until he learned to defend himself against the aliens. This trope is quite played out, but it was executed really well in the movie. Needless to say, it got glowing reviews and was admired by the audiences. Killing off the boy who lived sends a dark message, so fans were rooting for Harry to survive the killing curse once again in Deathly Hallows. Right on cue, Harry returned from limbo well and alive after his brief encounter with Dumbledore. Meetings with Dumbledore are restorative, no doubt, but Harry's revival isn't that simple in theory or practice. Harry's duel with Voldemort involved the laws of magic, which Voldemort himself didn't understand. When Voldemort tried to kill him as a baby and his curse backfired, a part of Voldemort's soul latched onto Harry. Harry became a vessel for Voldemort's final Horcrux. The Horcrux perished when Voldemort tried to kill him again, giving Harry the choice of returning to life if he wanted. J.K. Rowling also clarified that Voldemort used the Elder Wand to perform the killing curse, but the wand's true allegiance was to Harry. He was therefore not hit with the full potency of the curse, but badly enough to kill the Horcrux living inside him. In essence, Harry died and came back to life. When Neo was revived in the Matrix after becoming the One, he seemed invincible. He had found his true powers and was finally able to outmatch Agent Smith. Neo destroyed Agent Smith, but he didn't perish entirely. Smith was a sentient program after all, and they aren't programmed to be mortal the way humans are. After quote-unquote dying, Smith malfunctioned and became an exile program. Smith essentially got unplugged from the Matrix system, which changed his appearance too. He now had more notorious powers like the ability of replicating like a virus and copying himself over the minds of programs, blue pills, and red pills. Darth Maul's remarkable speed and agility make him a deadly warrior and opponent, so when Obi-Wan sent him tumbling down the planet core in two halves, his death seemed both shocking and inevitable. Maul, however, made a powerful return. Here's how this Sith Lord managed to survive getting chopped and dumped on a junk planet. After his fall, Maul survived by eating vermin and building himself spider-like limbs. While he was there, Maul's entire focus became his absolute hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi, which he used to keep himself alive. By the time his brother had found him, Maul had gone mad with rage and despair. He was brought back to Dathomir, where his mind and body were restored with the help of dark magic. With his brother at his side, Maul fought against Kenobi numerous times and went on an even darker trajectory of killing and destruction. Accidental resurrections are pretty much the theme of the Mummy movies, so this list would be incomplete without them. In The Mummy, Rick and Evelyn showed us that they would stop short of nothing while exploring the city of the dead, even if it meant unleashing a deadly mummy. While spending a night in Hamunaptra, Evelyn reads a page from the Book of Dead out loud. Apparently, this is enough for the excavated remains of Imhotep to come back to life and terrorize the Egyptian town. They managed to defeat him in the first movie, only to have him brought back again in The Mummy Returns by his reincarnated lover. In the supernatural universe, dying isn't a big deal. The show is a Pandora's box of fascinating paranormal beings. The Winchester brothers have dealt with zombies, engaged in time travel, fought fairies, and have both had run-ins with death. Death is so common actually that you can really just handpick your favorite supernatural resurrection story. For this particular example, I'm looking at Castiel's death. Back in season 5, Castiel banishes Lucifer's brother with holy fire in the most iconic way. An angry Lucifer then kills Castiel, but he doesn't remain dead for long. He's resurrected by God and returns with enhanced powers. And there's one death in the animated universe that everyone sees coming from a mile away. It's Kenny. South Park literally made a running gag of Kenny's death, so we had to have him on this list. Up until season 5, Kenny used to be killed in practically every episode. His deaths and resurrections seemed to happen for no particular reason other than South Park's unique brand of humor. An early insight on Kenny's constant revival hinted at his immortality. It was later revealed that Kenny's parents had associations with a death cult, which explained his capacity for regeneration. In the South Park universe, everyone was pretty much indifferent to Kenny's deaths. This wasn't the case with Brian's demise in Family Guy though, which received a huge backlash. Family Guy's decision to kill the Griffin's dog is widely cited as one of the dumbest moves in television history. After 12 long seasons with his best friend Stewie, Brian was fatally run over by a car. As if this wasn't bad enough, he was replaced by the very annoying Vinny. Stewie eventually went back in time to bring Brian back, restoring normalcy to the Family Guy fandom. It's been years since Buffy made her television debut, but she remains a pop culture icon. The Vampire Slayer is no stranger to getting killed herself. Buffy's first death was early in the series when she had a face-off with the Master. She was killed once again while trying to open a gate to hell towards the end of season 5. She was brought back to life in season 6 by Willow and the Scoobies through magic. Although the revival was successful, Buffy had to famously claw her way out of her coffin. When Jack encountered the Kraken in Dead Man's Chest, he faced a storm of phlegm and a heartless Davy Jones. Jack's barter with Davy Jones meant that Jack was obliged to join his crew or risk being dragged into Jones's locker inside the Kraken. This could have been avoided if Jack had Davy Jones's heart, but thanks to Norrington running away with it and Elizabeth deceiving him, the Kraken ate Jack. Getting consumed by the Kraken can be interpreted as death since it equates to being at the bottom of the sea. In fact, it's maybe a worse predicament than death itself. So when Jack was rescued from the world's end, many thought of it as his return from death. Michael Myers has been coming back to life in every Halloween movie. He has survived getting shot, stabbed, set on fire, and beaten to a pulp, but things seem to have changed when his sister Laurie came to the scene. Her epic clash with Michael seemed to have killed him. She stole the ambulance his body was kept in anyway, and for good reason. He came back to life again. Lori beheaded him right there, thinking that she had ended it once and for all. However, it turns out that Michael had switched places with a paramedic, so he wasn't dead after all. When Phil Coulson tragically died in the Avengers, it just didn't seem right. He had to serve a larger purpose in the franchise than being a motivational death, and he did. In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil was revealed to be alive. He was brought back from the dead using an experimental drug meant for reviving a dead Avenger. You'd think that this was his last brush with death, but Phil had a final death in the 6th season and this time returned to the series as an LMD, or life model decoy. Optimus Prime kicked the bucket in Revenge of the Fallen. This wasn't the end for him, as a Decepticon sacrifice brought him back in the film's climax. The new Prime could fly and had more damage resistance. His artillery was also spruced up greatly. This powerful new version also went on to behead Megatron in Transformers: Dark of the Moon. You know that extremely annoying thing villains do where they just keep talking instead of shooting the heroes? Well, Agent Smith is just not one of them. I'm talking about the Matrix, of course. Smith killed Neo when he entered the Matrix with Trinity to save Morpheus. While Trinity and Morpheus made it back alive, Smith ambushed Neo and pelted him with bullets. The gunshots that killed Neo in the Matrix made him flatline in the real world, until, of course, Trinity declared her love for him, making him the one and reviving him. This wasn't even Neo's first brush with death and rebirth in the Matrix trilogy. When he took the red pill in the beginning and decided to wake up, Neo almost died due to the disturbance it caused him. This set the tone for how the trilogy would go on to navigate the concepts of life, death, and consciousness within and beyond the Matrix. Battlestar Galactica dominated the television landscape when it was rebooted in the 2000s. BSG caused quite the stir in its 4-season run. Like any memorable sci-fi show, it featured a confounding death and resurrection. I'm talking about Kara Thrace, aka Starbuck. In one of the most powerful moments of the show, Kara was in what definitely looked like a fatal explosion. She then miraculously returned in the 3rd season's cliffhanger and spurred several fan theories about her revival, from being an angel to the 13th Cylon. There's no telling which of these holds more weight, as the writers have famously left that to our imaginations. That concludes our list for this video. I hope you enjoyed it.